Hey everybody, it's Matthew. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are back with some more of the DiscogLog, the show where we take a band's albums and we rank them all against each other. And today we are doing Stone Temple Pilots, still an active rock group today despite some of their long hiatuses and despite the issues with Scott Weiland. They are still going and trucking just like we are here today. And of course, to keep that train going, why don't you go down below and click that little subscribe button there? You know, because it's really easy to go down there and do that. So simple. It's just as easy as looking at this video. So why haven't you done it yet? Anyway, guys, let's get right into this DiscogLog here. We're not going to waste any time getting into the first album here, which is, of course, Core. Okay, of course, Core released in 1992 with producer Brendan O'Brien, so these guys are starting off strong with this. It opens right away with a big, heavy track, of course, with a big sound and all those wonderful things like that. It's a pretty good opening track, Dead and Bloated is, you know, that it really hits you pretty hard right in the face, and you immediately get Scott's great, well, compressed and distorted vocals on this, although vocals, I will say, sometimes feel a little bit too far back in the mix. Can't quite hear Scott clearly enough sometimes. But besides that, instruments and everything else sound really great to start with, so it's not something that requires a lot of discussion for us in this. Most albums we probably aren't even going to talk about it because it's going to sound good for pretty much all of these, but you know, and sometimes the cymbals are a little fizzy, a little weird kind of tails happening on the sound at the end, which might be kind of funky. This is the longest album actually in their discography at just over 53 minutes, I think, and some of the songs do feel like they're a little bit too long. These guys need to be, I think, a little bit more brief on some of these tracks. But anyway, you know, I think the messaging on this album is pretty great. It's called Core because that's supposed to be a reference to the Bible with the apple that Eve ate from the tree of knowledge. And of course, the songs deal with different issues of humanity, and basically, to sum it up, Scott basically called it confused humanity was basically the theme of this, like Dead and Bloated, and then sex type thing dealing with really messed up weird masculinity type issues. Wicked Garden is like the loss of innocence, and there's just a song called Straight Up Sin, and then Creep, which is like a song about, you know, feeling like you don't belong and not really knowing where to go next. And Plush, of course, is based on some real life kidnapping that Scott was reading about, and how the girl ended up being found dead and all those things. So it does pretty well on the messaging. I'm trying to be a little bit quicker on these descriptions. I didn't take as many notes as I have in the past to try to get through these a little bit quicker, so we're not spending too much time. But anyway, that being said, Core is going to go up into, I can't see what I'm doing because of the camera, give me a second. It's going up into A tier, so that's where it's going to land to start out. Good start for an opening album there. This album's on Facelift from Alice in Chains levels of a debut album, which is really fantastic. All right, let's get on to Purple now.
Can you figure out? Gone when you wake in the morning, gone when you find that there's no one sleeping, gone.
All right, going into Purple, this is the sophomore album, and we got a more mature band that knows a lot more about what they're doing, and of course a producer that knows more about how to deal with all the things that these guys want and how to make a good sound with this band. Brendan O'Brien continuing to be with the band. We've got a heavy opening track once again. These guys like to really hit you really hard and fast to start off the albums, which is pretty great. This one's a little bit different. It's not so this, you know, straight up hard rock that kind of felt pretty derivative and boring from, well, not boring, but it was pretty derivative and expected, despite the fact it was very quality, good stuff. But this one is not so much about that. It's got a more expansive sound. They're experimenting with different textures and ideas. The pacing of the songs is different. They're not all straight up hard rock. You know, there's a little bit like a, you know, kind of country feel, some blues type of things, a little bit of old school pop and old school classic rock type of things. So they're really expanding the sound. They go for some funkier sounds, funkier, you know, some funkier grooves and things like that, you know, trying to expand the palette a little bit. They're continuing with their, you know, bit of odd intervals and weird guitar chords and really weird chord progressions and things like that. You know, that's a good thing, and it's a signature of Dean DeLeo's playing, to get all those weird intervals and weird chords into it, and they slide right into what are otherwise, you know, at their core rock ideas. This album is overall a lot more interesting, sounds better. The weird issue with the cymbals I talked about is gone. Scott's vocals are a lot more forward in the mix, so he's very present here, so everything sounds really great and meshes well. Scott's figuring out how to be a little bit more flexible with his vocals, when to be aggressive, when to not be. You know, he's kind of mixing up kind of almost this jazz crooner type of feeling he has in his voice, and then even some little bit of old school country kind of sounds. With that said, of course, the album deals with things like relationships, propaganda, which of course I think Meat Plow is a song basically about propaganda. There's a lot of relationship stuff and things that go along with that. And of course, a lot of dealing with like craving in society and trying to reach for things that you can't necessarily grab onto. And a lot of it does deal with like relationships though, and people being manipulated or listening to the wrong, you know, thing with the propaganda that we talked about. And of course, just being sometimes delusional and not really paying attention to what's going on around them. Sometimes the messaging is not entirely clear because Scott's lyrics can be a little bit strange. But I mean, with, you know, overall increased quality of this, there's really only one place we can really go at this point with it, and that's of course to S Tier with Purple. Really fantastic album. This is pretty good, you know, classic Stone Temple Pilots, and they figure out pretty quick what they can do and how good they actually are. All right, let's get on to the next one here. We are on to Tiny Music. Anyway, this album is really interesting because it's a complete style change from the last two with the band. They're not doing the basic grunge hard rock sound, and they're instead going for more of a glam style thing with some flares of like, you know, old school pop, a lot of the British pop guys and stuff from the 80s and things like that. A lot more psychedelic sounds too. And even the occasional injection of a little bit of groovy R&B and things like that. So it's very different from the past two, and that's sometimes dangerous for a band to do. But of course, you know, it sounds fantastic, of course, because Brendan O'Brien is back for this one as well. It starts with a pretty kind of intense song lyrically, I think, called Pops Love Suicide. And I'm not necessarily sure what this is about. I don't know if it's a reference to changes in like musical styles and things like that, or if it's just a really intense song about somebody just becoming heartless in the course of, you know, a relationship or something like that, just killing their love off so they don't continue to love in the future or something like that. Super weird kind of idea, I think. Again, lyrics sometimes hard to interpret with Scott. But anyway, Scott changes up his vocal style. He's going for a little bit more higher pitched stuff. It's kind of more based on that classic or not classic, but the glam rock style of, guys like Motley Crue and things like that. I forgot the singer's name. But again, though, there's some, slowed down songs that are a little more ballad-like, and he goes into what I talked about before, this kind of croony type of sound, but it's a little more noticeable on a lot of the songs on here. He's going from soft to harsh things, he's whispering more, he's being a little bit more particular with harmony parts and things like that. So it's making a really great, expansive of his vocals on this that fit in the sound very well. It's more straightforward. It's not very long and very brief on this, even with how quality it actually is. But that doesn't leave a whole lot. That doesn't leave anything out, though. The parts feel richer. There's more texture and things like that. So they're making really great use of the arrangements that they're going with. Robert DeLeo plays a really big role in the writing on this. The vocals are a little bit thin sometimes, but some of that's due to Scott's delivery and I think the way they handled it, but it's not really a big deal. You'd rather it be like that than to be too harsh. And then, of course, theming seems all right with this, things like societal pressures, playing to expectations and kind of, hiding yourself from people, with songs like Lady Picture Show and Big Bang Baby, doing those type of ideas. And there's, of course, things like not being honest, subverting the truth, not necessarily lying, just going around it, dealing with failure and criticism, having to figure out how to move on when things don't necessarily go your way, which, of course, tripping on a hole in a paper heart, which might actually be about drugs, though. I think that's the signature song on this album. It might be about drugs, so it doesn't necessarily fit into all those things that we've talked about, but the rest of it, does fit into those other ideas. The albums have followed somewhat of a through line because it's all about societal issues from Scott's perspective. All right, let's rate this thing. Of course, because it's a very successful style change up that continues on from the last one in terms of having, a rich sound and textures, really interesting parts and things like that, really interesting vocal stylings and things like that. It's a well executed album that basically, continues straight on from Purple, so it's high quality and it's going to go up into S tier along with it. There we go, everybody. Let's get on to number 4. All right, number 4. Let's go on to this. This one may be the weakest album out of the ones we're going to look at today, but let's talk about why that might be the case. Anyway, it's incredibly heavy. Like, it's gone beyond core in its heaviness in a way that feels like it's trying to appeal at the time, to when this came out in 1998, right, to more of the aggressive nu metal stuff that was starting to come on at around this time. Not necessarily feeling like Stone Temple Pilots, because it goes for a lot of just straight up heaviness a lot of the time without being particularly interesting, despite having some signature DeLeo moves with a lot of the riffs and things like that kind of just hit hard. They're just heavy all the time, and that's kind of boring. And then there's parts where they interlude a little bit and it's a little bit softer. It feels like they've taken, based on how Scott is singing and how some of the stuff sounds, it sounds like they took Alice in Chains and Deftones and mashed it up into the one big mess, kind of. Which isn't necessarily bad, but there's too much contrast between some of the different sections of the songs, especially in the first 3. And, it's just heavy, repetitive, not really any hooky writing or anything like that, especially with the vocals. On some of the heavier ones, they feel a little bit simple. I feel like Scott's voice doesn't fit some of these heavier songs as well at this point, because he was still using some of that kind of thin, upper range sound that he was using on the previous album, Tiny Music. And it feels like it's not hitting hard enough to go along with the music that it's on top of. You know, Scott feels less important to some of the things, which is not great for them because he does have very unique, you know, vocal moves and tendencies that make the band interesting, and it feels like he wasn't doing that so much here. There are some good dialed back tracks on here with good acoustic sounds, but it feels completely disjointed because it goes from heavy, heavy, heavy to, oh, we're going to chill out a little bit. Oh, then we're going to have another heavy. And then, you know, there's not a through line with the sound. It's either this or that. That's not a mix of ideas that was, you know, consistent with their previous efforts. Feels like it's not nearly as creative as the past ones, you know, doesn't really rely on the strength of the band. There are times where Scott's a little bit more interesting and flexible with his vocals, but that's later in the album. Songs like Glide and Atlanta are pretty alright on here, you know, but most of this is kind of just bleh. But anyway, of course, this deals a lot more with drugs because he's been using them longer, and that's a lot on his mind. Some bad relationships and relationships falling apart and things like that. Creepy behaviors and being stuck in depression, having to let go of things, or you're just going to suffer and be miserable. You know, being haunted by past problems and relationships that didn't work out and things like that. Yeah, so the messaging is pretty dark sometimes on here, but sometimes it doesn't feel too consistent with itself, because when you're talking about drugs and stuff, and then you're jumping to a song like Sour Girl and Glide, which kind of have very little to do with that. They're on a different spectrum than that. The messaging is kind of jumping around too much on here. But anyway, we're going to rank this guy real quick. Unfortunately, just because they kind of phoned this in and did not do anything interesting, since we're coming down from that high point where we were, this makes this album feel really bad overall, and it's gonna go and see. It's not a bad album. It sounds great, you know. I mean, it's good, decent arranging, you know, and it's not terribly written. It's a quality album. It's just for them, where we're coming from, this is an L. We really don't like it too much. All right, let's get on to the next one, Shangri-La Dee. All right, here we go. This released in 2001 is the last album that was produced by Brendan O'Brien. Unfortunately, it's an end of an era, sadly, as Brendan is, of course, a quite talented engineer and mixer. But we're back to more classic Stone Temple Pilots here, and that's what we like to see. You know, better lyrics than previous efforts, you know. Things make a little bit more sense. They aren't off the wall weird and kind of jumping around too much, and they're also not cliche, which it could be at times on number 4. And we're back to a wider variety of styles that have been blended together quite well. There aren't songs that feel too abrupt in a style change or anything. Everything's got a point of view that's consistent with the rest of the album for the most part. Very consistent vocals, and vocal mixing is very good. You know, Scott provides a lot of vocal variety across this album without feeling too much like a copycat of other artists. There are times where he could sound a lot too much like another singer in the past ones, especially on number 4. On this, he does a much better job of not sounding that way. The guitar parts are thought out much better. This has a similar level of execution that Tiny Music does in the way it's arranged and the consistency of the vocal style and things like that. So it's a lot better in that regard, and it's not repetitive at all, where number 4 was quite so. There's a wider range of lyrical content and point of views here because Scott is married and a father at this point, so he's a little bit less selfish in his writing and his perspectives here on this. So it feels like it's much better messaging and much more interesting for him, as in the past he's not been quite so introspective with things here. there's more bigger soundscapes, there's more instrumentation happening. It's a very rich record in terms of that. It has some good songs. Of course, Days of the Week was the single to this. Pretty good Beatles-esque kind of tune, but has more kind of depressing lyrics, of course. But I mean, it's STP, so sometimes it's like that. It does have pretty good songs on here. A lot of the later ones can get a little bit too dreamy, but I mean, there's a stylistic point of view of those, though, that makes sense. Bipolar Bear is a little bit underrated on here, I think, because it's about, his dealing with his issues of having bipolar disorder. But it's a very interesting dichotomy because it's a very laid back, kind of dreamy song, and yet it's got these weird lyrics about a mania episode, basically. It's really interesting. There's some love songs here. There's some stuff that's dedicated to his son. There's stuff of him feeling lonely because he's away from his family, but there's also introspective stuff talking about, I think, how, the things he was doing, like being on tour for a long time, doing drugs and things, were affecting his marriage and, people around him. So, like I said, much more introspective, dealing with, like I said, drugs, mental health, sensory overload, married life, the shame of, letting people down, love kind of talking down overly selfish pursuits. But of course, this is a much higher quality record than the last one, number 4, but it's not quite to that level of Purple and Tiny Music, so this one's going to go in A. All right, next we've got the self-titled Stone Temple Pilots from 2010. Okay, so this is a different era of the band. They've been on a long hiatus here. Got separated for about 8 years before they went and recorded this new one. It is self-produced specifically by the DeLeo brothers. So it's different, but despite that, it does sound very good because we have experience and modern technology. So it doesn't miss a whole lot from, vintage Stone Temple Pilot stuff. It uses some of their past ideas, but in a little bit different way. There's a little bit more of an indie spin here. So there's some genre blending. It's not quite as, interesting in genre blending as, like the previous album and, of course, our other S tiers that we've talked about. But that being said, it does sound very nice. It's very in your face, which is very good. And it's not too long. Even though it's self-produced, sometimes that can happen on self-produced records. They can get a little bit too long because nobody wants to cut anything, but they didn't have that problem here because it's 12 songs. It's barely 41 minutes. Not bad. It does take a lot from Purple and Tiny Music, though, with a bit more of a modern presentation in terms of the sound and the vocal styling. Scott does sound very good on here. His vocals are very upfront, very present. And he does experiment a little bit. He's doing some different deliveries than he's done from the past in his vocals. And the band does use some of their more signature sounds that they kind of abandoned in the previous 2 albums before this, having chromatic sounding things and that weird notes and weird progressions in the chords and things like that made them a little bit more interesting than some of your average grunge bands. It uses a lot more blues than some of the past ones did, so, that's interesting to point out. Of course, the 60s, 70s pop kind of sounds and the psychedelic rock with a new sort of indie presentation. It does feel repetitive sometimes. Some of the lyrics don't feel that imaginative. There's a lot of repeating lyrics and things. It's mostly okay, but, can be a little bit repetitive. It doesn't sound old, but it doesn't really push boundaries either like they've done with their previous records. And even the one before this did push a little bit because it introduced things that were a new sound for the band. This does a little bit of that, but just doesn't do a whole lot. it does sound kind of like what you would have expected them to come out with, which is a little bit boring. I don't want to be too harsh on it, but you know, it doesn't feel quite as good as the other one because they're doing things they've already done before, and it sounds a little bit different than it did then, but it's not overwhelmingly different or different enough that you really care. It does go back to some of old themes with the lyrics of things like manipulation and propaganda and, you know, relationships going bad and things like that, but it has a little bit different ideas with that, you know, of trying to get over, you know, turmoil and fear and different emotional situations. Talks a little bit about taking risks sometimes because that's just what you need to do if you want to get over things or get anywhere in life. And then, of course, themes of things you might encounter if you're getting older. So it does have a little bit more mature of a message, I think, on this. But anyway, let's get to braiding it. Unfortunately, because it doesn't feel quite as good as Shangri-La Dee, it feels a little bit too predictable. It's going to, unfortunately, be stuck down in B tier. But it's better than number 4, though, so we'll give it that. All right, let's move on to a big change for the band here with the self-titled from 2018. All right, 2018 Stone Temple Pilots. This was a big change for the band because it is the first album they have done with new singer Jeff Gutt, formerly of new metal band Dry Cell. And despite that happening, this album sounds pretty good for a new singer. I think Jeff really gets the band here and does a very good job with his vocals. Has a little bit more hard rock maybe than the last album did, and it has more hooky writing and things like that, so they've gone back to some of the things they do pretty well. Has more of the band singer sounds with odd notes and chords and things like that, a lot more so, and we haven't really seen these kind of sounds since Core and Purple from them, so it's really great that they've gone back to that here. And it even throws in a little bit of kind of jazz sounds and things like that, which is really interesting. Comes a lot from Robert DeLeo's interest and things like that. He likes jazz and bossa nova and those kind of genres. Despite them going back even deeper into some of their older sounds, this doesn't sound like an outdated old album. It sounds fresh for them still. And again, Jeff, very good for the band, occupies the same similar tonal space that Scott does. So it sounds pretty good. It doesn't sound wildly different from their past things. So that's a really good job from the band of picking the correct singer for the job. But Jeff's also a very experienced singer, and his voice sounds very nice on here. Very strong, full voice, you know. Scott sometimes could be a little thin. That doesn't happen with Jeff. So he's a very good singer. You know, he does use a little bit of some of those Waylandisms, but he doesn't rely too heavily on them to, you know, create his vocals and his sound. So he's separated enough that he doesn't feel like he's copying Scott, but he occupies a similar space to him, so he doesn't feel foreign. Now, the lyrics are a little bit more precise. There's clearer messaging than some past albums here. Very good instrumentation, you know. They're not doing too many weird different things. They're doing pretty much what their, you know, core stuff is, with good distorted guitars, acoustic bits in there, maybe a little bit of some other types of keyboards and things occasionally, but it's not like, let's try this, and this, you know. They're not jumping around like that. The album's presentation is very consistent with the theming and those things. You know, it doesn't try too many styles for its own sake, which they were guilty of on some of their past albums, you know. It has a pretty clear direction. The vocals are very consistent. They are produced and mixed pretty much the same way on almost every song, which you could say is a little bit bad and uninteresting, but it's also really nice to have that because that gives you a through line even when There are some style change-ups and things. You still have the similar vocal to kind of grab onto, and that's really good. This has songs that are about like human struggles and things like that. Guilty, Just a Little Lie, Roll Me Under, It's got stuff about relationships, moving on, regrets, mental health, surviving in the world, which Meadow is kind of about that type of idea, just trying to survive. And then The Art of Letting Go, pretty obvious, and The Finest Hour. Is a very sad song, in a way that they have not done with a song before, because it has this super laid back instrumentation, and then it's a song that it sounds like waiting for somebody important to him to die, or watching them die or whatever, and saying it's their finest hour just before they go or something like that. It's a really sad song, honestly, because it obviously deals with somebody dying, I think. But anyway, with that in mind, the sound, the vocal messaging, the good job that Jeff did with these lyrics and things like that, this is actually a really pretty good album. And because of that, this could be controversial, but it's going to go in A tier because, it's just that good. Because, it's a better album than the first self-titled, because it executes the things they were trying to do on this much better. A lot of the songs sound like they're on their own, whereas on the first self-titled, they felt like they were trying to go for a very specific thing on everything, which is, obviously not as interesting. So, okay, let's go on to the last one here. This is Perdida.
Behind the smile, I'm slowly dying. Oh, Perdida, come and go. Stay with me tonight.
All right, Perdida is self-produced album. Forgot to add the last one was, although these say that it's produced by the whole band, unlike on the first self-titled where it says the names of the DeLeo brothers. So this is an acoustic album. Surprise, which is not really that surprising from these guys. They've had an MTV Unplugged. There's a lot of acoustic-driven songs in their discography, so this was coming at some point. They were going to do this, And it has some very beautiful melodies and very nice guitar playing from the boys. Robert probably contributed significantly to this because it has a very Spanish, jazz, bossa nova, and even some Western style kind of acoustic guitar ideas in here that sound very pretty, very beautiful things. And when I say Western, I mean like Western music, like they put on like cowboy movie soundtracks, that kind of music, which is technically its own genre. Anyway, Jeff's voice is very haunting on this. He does a very good job at getting this longing, haunting sound. He's good at changing it up, though, on the ones that are a little bit faster. His voice is not boring at all on this record. I did not take a whole lot of notes for this. There's barely anything on it because there wasn't a whole lot to say. It's just a really pretty acoustic album, But it does have new genre styles for them and new presentations of their sounds and things like that. Very good textures. There are some times where there is electric guitar and it's used very sparingly and used very effectively, though. So if we're going to do that on the acoustic album, it's got to be good, and they do it. It is completely unique from anything they've done in the past, being entirely acoustic. Theming wise, it's completely different because it deals with death a lot more, which is not a theme they explored very extensively prior to this. And of course, the title of the album is literally loss. It's the Spanish word for the idea of loss, like losing something, losing somebody, And of course, some of the songs deal with that. Perdida, I don't know that it specifically, it does, because it feels like a song about grief or mourning. So yeah, it's kind of that way. Things like that, It's got lyrics about moving on and starting over, a fallout from a relationship and trying to, get over that or recapture what was good about the relationships to start with, recovering from trauma and things like that, and even in some ways being hopeful or optimistic for the future. It's not over for you just because you've lost a lot. There's still more. You can still find, love essentially somewhere else. in places like that, you know, dealing with more trauma. You know, there's a song called You Found Yourself While Losing Your Heart, which is not an introspective song. It feels like a third person. It says, it basically is telling you that I guess your heartbreak or your grief allowed you to discover who you really were, which is a very interesting spin to put on the idea of loss. You know, it's kind of the what comes after type of thing. A lot of these songs are super emotional and require a lot of introspection, and I'm really impressed by Jeff of what he was able to get out of these songs. You know, that's not something you would have expected with the guy's career necessarily, that he could write lyrics like this, but he does an incredible job on this. And this is gonna be super weird with us ranking this because it's an acoustic album. It's way different from anything they've done before, but it's so pretty and beautiful and well executed and emotional. This is one of the best things they've done, and even with a new singer, so it's gonna go in S tier. And some people are gonna disagree with me. Rolling Stone hated this album, and I don't know why. Nobody else, you know, rated this poorly except for them. They gave it like a 2 out of 10 or something, because they were like, unfortunately, by going acoustic, the band is whatever. It's some BS that Rolling Stone, of course, pulls because they're always stuck in the past. And if you dare to do something that doesn't sound like the best thing you did, you know, 20 years ago, they're going to be like, ew, that's gross. But forget them. We know Rolling Stone is completely nuts anyway, and they do some of the weirdest stuff with their rankings of different things. But anyway, guys, there it is. That is the complete DiscogLog there for Stone Temple Pilots. I did leave out the EP they did with Chester Bennington, but I forgot that's part of the rules. We're not supposed to do EPs or compilations in our ranking for this. It's just supposed to be straight up LPs. But anyway, hope you guys enjoyed that. Like and subscribe if you did, of course. Leave a comment down below if you like. You can rank the albums. You can tell me which one's your favorite, which one is your least favorite, or you can say why you might disagree with how some of these are rated. Anyway, guys, I will see you all in the next video. Have a good one.